Hi, this is Dr. Bushman, and we're going to be talking about the FourSight teaming model or the FourSight collaboration model. So I'm going to go ahead and share out my screen. And welcome, by the way, to today's presentation. And you should be taking a look or see the presentation now. And you'll notice straight off the bat, the FourSight collaboration model is a direct overlap with the creative problem solving process. There are some slight nuances, but I also need to mention that this research is done by Nielsen Thurber, Dr. Miller, Dr. Puccio, and they are the owners and of the FourSight Group and part of the Creative Problem Solving Institute in the Buffalo State University system, as well as the University of the Virgin Islands Creative Doctoral Program. Buffalo State and the UVI are the first two universities, UVI being first, to have a doctorate in creativity and innovation, in particular for innovation and change at the doctorate level. Buffalo State has had the longest running master's program, and they are the home for the Creative Problem Solving Institute that was formed many years ago, decades ago, by Mr. Osborne, the father of creative problem solving. So FourSight, what is it? FourSight is the human part of the creative problem solving system. There are lots of creative problem solving models, or rather innovation models, such as MIT design thinking, which we've been talking about, as well as agile in the software development world. There are different models. However, you can have a great model, but not understand how to lead, guide, and develop a team within that model and still come out with lackluster performances. And so what FourSight does, FourSight adds the ever increasingly more important ability for us to understand how different people think, how different people see the creative problem solving or design problem differently, or the process differently, and what parts that they can really optimize in, and even how they have developed certain tools based on their type of thinking over time. And so one thing that we learned during research, and again, this is one of our scientific methods that are scientifically vetted, is that you've got to take the people part into consideration with the process if you're going to optimize innovation and creativity, no matter what model you're using: design thinking, agile, CPS, etc. So two of those models that we just mentioned, I wanted to actually kind of review those a little bit, because again, FourSight provides that leadership part, that team building part, that team management part, and collaboration to the innovation models. So MIT design thinking actually is very similar to CPS, except it adds a couple of extra components. And we use design thinking typically when we're designing products for organizations or processes as well. And so empathize is really kind of the clarifying stage, and empathize, define. And what you're doing there is that you're empathizing with the customer, or empathizing with the stakeholders, or the people that are involved, who are going to be affected by what's going on, the problem that you need to solve. And then you define it. And clearly, if you think about it, empathizing, define it, those are two of the stages in the CPS clarifying process, right? So you need to know what we're going to solve and who it's going to affect. Next stage is ideate, and then prototype. If you think about my hamburger example, when we talked about diverge and converge thinking, right? If you did not view that video, divergent thinking happens in this process in many of its stages where we take a process apart. I use an example of a hamburger, where if I wanted to create the world's greatest hamburger, I'm going to divide it into parts: the bun, the burger, the cheese, the toppings, the sauce, etc. And I'm going to evaluate different combinations that I could put together using different ingredients, and then I'm going to converge them all back together into a burger. Matter of fact, during that burger converge or that convergence to build the burger, I'm going to have a plan, and that plan literally is to where should each layer sit. Maybe I want to have the sauce between the burger and the cheese so that my bun doesn't get soggy, etc. Prototyping, in this example, would be taking a bite of the burger. If I love it, great, right? Okay. I built a burger, I tested it by tasting it, and if it's great, move on. If it's not so great, you repeat the process. Tear it apart, make some changes, put it back together, test it. That's prototyping. Prototyping is the most important step in perfecting a product and making sure that what you put out to market is actually going to work. So take our time there. Agile methodology is what we use in software development lifecycle. This is the world that I came from. And with each of the 6 steps in Agile, you can actually go through the CPS process and use its tools. But the important thing we're looking at is actually the FourSight collaboration model. And it's literally called FourSight because we see humankind sees problem solving in 4 distinct ways. So our first major discovery, and this was done by Dr. Puccio, Dr. Miller, 2 of the initial scientists for that. Dr. Puccio is the stalwart professor in creative problem solving, creative thinking at Buffalo State University. And Dr. Miller is a very business minded, and how do we actually take this approach and make sure that it has value in the business world as well. 2 very, very intelligent, very well-practiced doctors and gentlemen. And so discovery 1 was creativity for innovation is not just one type of thinking, 4 types. And this is universal. Every human being thinks in one of these 4 types that we're going to talk about, or a combination of them. It is literally how we've evolved or developed as human beings. This is how our brains think. The second discovery is that these 4 types of thinking are personified in people. It comes out in how we see the world and how we communicate, and they don't always get along. So there are rubs and the way that certain people communicate, and we're going to learn why. And this is so important because if you're going to be a high-performing, innovative, creative driver, your teams have to collaborate, cooperate, and communicate effectively for the process to work. So here's some important discoveries just to hopefully pique your interest in the FourSight. One of the things when we looked at or when Dr. Puccio, Miller, the FourSight group in the research was different groups. And here's one thing that's really interesting, especially for educators, is that teachers tend to treat their students differently. They treat the students who have the same FourSight thinking type or creative thinking type that they do differently than they treat their other students. It is the cause of some unconscious biases. And unless we become aware of what our FourSight or our creative innovation thinking type is, we will not understand why we see the world the way that we do and how that is actually controlling how we communicate. And we'll talk a little bit about in a minute what a cognitive preference is, so you fully understand and grasp it. But first, let's look at some of these other findings. Younger generations are actually more likely to be creative or ideators. And so if you remember our ideation study or process stage in the creative problem solving process, we don't know why this is, but we theorize that the younger generations have been exposed to the internet and technology far more than the older generations. And we're literally watching the brain, possibly watching the brain adapt to that environment. And it's causing us to be more creative as a species. Understanding these things will improve leader to subordinate alignment and understanding how to better manage them. And here's the crazy thing. It's also a predictor of workplace burnout. They did a study post-COVID in the medical community on why certain professionals burn out quicker than others. And clarifiers, people who have a clarifying mindset, the four mindsets, by the way, are clarifier, ideator, developer, implementer. No surprise, they literally overlap the CPS process. We as humankind not only think in the creative problem solving system way, it is actually a process we use to make the best decisions. And clarifiers actually struggle in ambiguous environments. So they have a tendency to burn out quicker at work. And ideators tend to have the most resilience at work. So these four stages: clarifying, ideating, developing, implementing, right? We literally call people clarifiers, ideators, developers, implementers. These are cognitive preferences. So what's a cognitive preference? A cognitive preference is something that you're born with. It's a way that you think. For instance, if you're right or left-handed, that's a cognitive preference. And so what we do in our lives, if we're born naturally right-handed, what we'll do is we'll use our right hand to learn how to write, to learn how to throw, to learn how to do things. And we develop fine motor skills and skills based on that cognitive preference. That makes our left hands, right, not as skilled. And so, or vice versa. If you're left-handed, you develop all your fine motor skills typically in your left hand, and your right hand is not as developed. And a few of us, certain percentage, are ambidextrous and can use both. Now, here's the thing. If you're a clarifier, you literally see the world through blue-colored glasses. You see the world as a clarifier, and that's in a different way than an ideator. And you will naturally typically take classes, choose a profession. We can typically predict what profession you will take depending on your FourSight thinking process. And they literally control our lives. Most implementers end up becoming managers. Developers, only 6% of us are pure developers. Think computer coders, right? Ideators, we're usually very creative. And clarifiers, we like to get all the data, get the details, and we want to know the whole story before we move on. So these things come out and they're deeper than personality, and they control the type of words and language that we use. So we communicate differently as well. So when it comes to collaboration, cooperation, and teamwork, understanding not only but the people that we work with creative mindset is super duper important. So some important concepts. Remember, creative thinking preferences or cognitive preference are universal. It doesn't matter ethnic group, race, coming from a developed or undeveloped nation. It doesn't matter what your level of education is. None of that matters. It is literally how humankind has developed into these four main thinking types. Each step has unique mental skills. When we looked at CPS, we looked at some of the tools that the different stages actually have. Those stages and tools are used and overlap with MIT design thinking, Agile as well. They all have their own types of tools. But the key here is, let's say you're a clarifier, you may not have learned to use ideating tools. So you can actually go and learn ideating tools and gain energy or gain skills in an area you're not naturally given to. And that's really, really important, especially for those of us who want to be deeply involved with creativity. We need to develop the other types of thinking, the other parts of our brain. Like, let's say if you're a clarifier, we need to learn ideation skills so that we can master ideation skills. We need to learn developing skills so that we can empathize and respect other people's, the way that they think as a developer, and we too then could collaborate with them. And we need to leverage the diversity in these thinking types as an implementer so that we can actually drive the team and make better outcomes and improve our performance. It's very important. One thing to remember, if you do take the FourSight assessment, preference doesn't equal ability. Preference is just the type of creative thinking that you were born with. And you can have a combination of those. But you still have to go to school and learn the art and process and science of creativity and innovation. So what's a clarifier? Clarifiers love to clarify problems. They're the ones that are always asking questions. They look at the detail. One of the things, and they gather information. So if you think about it, in the CPS or even in design thinking, the first stage is clarifying the problem and loving the problem. Clarifiers are naturally given to this. So if we have somebody on our team who's a clarifier, we might want them to lead this process and then help the others actually see problem definition and creating those problem questions the way that they can. One of the things that they have to watch out for is that sometimes they can get caught up in analysis paralysis and not move forward as fast as they can. They've got to trust the team to know when it's time to move the ideation stage. So what's an ideator? Ideators look at the big picture. They can actually see and connect dots that other people may not see. They can look at a pattern and look at a process and go, wow, there's 10 processes, there's steps in this process, but 4, 5, and 7 overlap. We don't really need those. And they can do that divergent, convergent thing sometimes easier, or they're more naturally given to that. Other thinking types might have to work to learn that tool, but as an ideator, it might come a little bit more natural to them, especially the divergent stage. One of the things, however, is being a big picture person, sometimes they overlook the details and they think in a little bit too big of a global scale. So they need clarifiers and developers to help them think a little bit more in the detail areas. A developer, this is the person who loves to take things from good to great. They explore and analyze the pluses and minuses. Remember that developer tool, right? We looked at the pluses, right? And the positives, the challenges, and the things we have to overcome, right? So are the possibilities, the PPCO tool, that's exactly what a developer does. They love to do that step. And so this type of person was born this way, and they have more than likely gone to school and probably got project management skills. Because again, we tend to develop the areas are our skills and the areas in which we have a cognitive preference. The one thing is they can become perfectionists, and they really have to watch out for the fact that they may overshoot and try to add too many things to the solution that aren't worth the effort. We have to make sure that we have our must-haves, and we might not necessarily get all of our nice-to-haves in the solutions. So finally, our implementers, they give structured ideas, they finalize and formalize the plans, They're the ones that drive the timelines, make sure people are doing what they're supposed to. And again, most of the time, implementers become managers or leaders. Sometimes they can jump too quickly. Sometimes they give very vague instructions. One thing that really helps implementers is when we're working on a project, is we make sure that we give them feedback where we're at in our in the stage that we're in. We need to give them consistent and constant feedback saying, hey, this is where I'm at on my project, we're on time, or I need help with this, or I need more time, etc. That helps them, helps their soul or their mind or their cognitive preference function well without worry, which is super important. And then we wanted to look at how important getting those tools are in these 4 different areas. And so what the slide is actually showing, it's a slide of a little over 1,000 people who were polled, and it's saying, well, how important are those tools? How important are those skills in each of those 4 thinking types, right? You can see how, again, design thinking, CPS, etc., all kind of overlap, and our skill sets are important. And what's interesting is clarifying skills are very important all across the organization, from a non-management position all the way up to executives. Development skills are important, but not as important to an organization. Implementer skills, you would say, okay, well, that makes sense. An implementer, that's the yellow line, they go up in importance the higher we go in responsibility. Well, that makes sense. The more responsibility we have, the better leader or manager we should be, right? The one that is a real shocker for most people is the need for creative and innovation thinking. Creativity and innovation thinking is the #1 most important skill that leaders and organizational managers have to learn and develop the higher they go in an organization. And so if you take a look at the steep ramp of the orange ramp on the grid, you'll see that learning creativity and innovation skills is why we're spending, in America, is spending so much time and creating so much buzz about innovation and creative thinking in today's academic and government as well as corporate environments. So finally, in regard to developing those skills, when you develop skills in a particular area, your brain adds energy towards those. You begin to think in a more well-rounded, creative, and innovative way. And this is what we call an integrator. And so in becoming an integrator, this is someone, which is, I'm an integrator after years of practice, where I can not only relate, communicate, cooperate, and also drive all stages of the creative process. And that's very important for anyone who wants to have a creative career, especially a career in creative leadership and management. And so our last slide, I just wanted to again kind of show you some of the tools that FourSight has. And as you look through your CEF CPS guide for this class, the handout, what you'll notice is that most of these tools are also included in the CPS process, and so they overlap. So almost any tool that you use or learn in CPS is going to overlap with our FourSight profile. Why? Because again, remember, you can have a great process, but if you don't understand how to put the right people in the right place and lead a collaborative, cooperative team, you will not get the benefits from the process that you could be. So FourSight thinking process, the profiles, the cognitive thinking types, clarifiers, ideators, developers, implementers, finally integrators. When we have those all at work and we know how to collaborate, being self-aware and aware of our teammates' profile, we can better work together, we can better optimize each stage, and we can better optimize each tool. And what does that do? when we converge, we get the greatest outcome that we can in the creative decision-making process. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed the video. Talk to you soon.